Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to be talking about my change in employment, which I announced recently on stream. I'm also going to walk you through the background of why I decided to do this. And yeah, I guess we'll get started with the announcement since that's the most important part. I will be leaving Stripe. Well, by the time you watch this video, by the time this video goes up, it might have already happened. But I will be leaving Stripe and I will be taking a new job at Sentry, where I'm going to be working on developer productivity. But yeah, in order to describe how we got here, I guess we have to set the stage. So let's go back to the pandemic. I was working at Lyft, and Lyft laid off a good percentage of their employees, somewhere around 19 to 20% of employees. I was one of those, and I decided to take the time off to work on one of my own personal projects, that being pre-commit CI, and also focusing a little bit more on streaming and trying to make that a thing. Now, of course, streaming open source on Twitch and working on a personal project don't necessarily pay the bills, but it was a useful 9 months, and I think I got a pretty cool product out of it. I'm very proud of the work that I put into pre-commit CI, and I use it, essentially every day, and it just makes things so much better. But around the 9-ish month period, I decided that I should start looking for work again. And about that same time, a friend of mine, Timothy Crosley, who works at Stripe, and built iSort. If you're familiar with the import sorter package, I of course have my own, but teach their own. Timothy reached out to me, and we had talked in open source before, and he was like, "Yo, Stripe is looking to build out a Python infrastructure team. We use a bunch of the open source software that you maintain, and we think you'd be a good fit to work at Stripe and build out that Python infrastructure team." And all those things were true. Like, I was a good candidate to build out a Python infrastructure team, and the opportunity seemed really exciting. Stripe had just barely started making a Python infra team as a way to make developers productive and like build out things that you need when you're working in Python. You need a team to add workflows to manage dependencies. You need to deal with security issues. You need to do all sorts of stuff around managing Python to make it successful, upgrading the Python version, those sorts of things. And there wasn't really a team in place. There was a team that managed a whole bunch of other stuff related to that and that as well. And it wasn't their primary focus. And so the idea was to build a separate team to do that. And that all sounded great. It sounded exactly what my skill set matches up with. And went through the interview process. Everyone that I talked to was great. The position seemed like a really good opportunity, pays fairly well, etc., etc. And I decided, what, yeah, I'm gonna take this job. I'm gonna try and make this team successful and work on Python infra, stuff that I'm great at. And so I took the job and worked on Python infrastructure. And around November-ish, so this is 9 months after joining. I joined in February. Leadership announced that they are going to shift focus for development at Stripe from classically Ruby services. Stripe is primarily a Ruby shop, so Python isn't really the primary focus. But the shift was going to be from Ruby services to Java services in a service technology written internally called Horizon. And the proposition was that development was going to focus on enabling new service development in Java, and that pretty much all the other languages were going to be backburnered for at least 6 months while that's focused on. This meant the Go team, the Scala team, the Ruby compiler team, and the Python team were essentially iced. And this is when I kind of realized that Stripe's leadership priorities were not quite, maybe a little bit short-sighted is how I would put it. But the focus there was on, oh, okay, let's throw warm bodies at this Java problem because we haven't invested in it sufficiently to make it successful. And hopefully those warm bodies will be able to build out this new service stack and make developers productive. And maybe this is the right choice. I don't know. And it hasn't played out, so I can't really say one way or another. But I was not hired to work on Java, and I was not really happy doing that. to say the least. But it also kind of showed that, like, if you're gonna make Java a priority, you should probably invest in it with people that actually know Java. Hire a Java infra team. Now there is a Java infra team, but scale up the Java infra team to support the demands of the developers that you're going to throw at that service stack, rather than diverting people that may not want to actually work on that stuff to work on that stuff. And I remember my manager said a thing that really kind of flipped my brain into how I thought about this. He said to me, "You did such a good job at building out the Python infrastructure at Stripe that we don't need to worry about that while the Python team is canceled, because it's in such a good state that we can kind of keep going without that." And to me, that meant, oh, okay, well, I did a really great job for the 7 or 8 months, and yeah, now Stripe doesn't need Python anymore, which may or may not be true. But anyway, I was not too plussed about being redirected to work on something that I think is kind of a waste of my time. I'm not a Java engineer. I've written some Java, but my talents are wasted on things that I'm not good at, I think. But I wasn't yet to my 1 year, and so I wanted to make sure I got my initial stock vest and all the other stuff that comes along with that. So I stuck around and finished out my 1 year and 2 months ish tenure at Stripe. But yeah, that's the primary reason that I'm moving on. Is I would rather work on things that I'm good at and things that I enjoy working on. And that brings me to my next job, which is going to be at Sentry. Sentry is a Python shop, so hopefully they don't pull the rug and we're porting everything into Java. Wouldn't that be ironic? There's no way that's going to happen. But yeah, I'm going to be working at Sentry. I'm going to be building out a developer experience organization, and I'm finally going to work at a smaller company. I've been telling myself every time I've looked for a job, I'm like, I would really like to work at a smaller company. I went from Yelp, which was 200-ish, 300-ish, and I was like, oh, I want to work at a smaller company. And then I landed at Lyft, which was like 400, 600, and eventually like 1,200 engineers. And then I left Lyft, and I was like, oh, I want to work at a smaller company. And I worked at Stripe, which I had no idea, but Stripe is huge compared to Lyft. Yeah, Sentry is 100-ish engineers, so it should be a much smaller and much nicer fit. But anyway, kind of wanted to summarize my thoughts. I realize this is a little bit rambly, but hopefully you now have the context about why I'm switching jobs and why I'm excited about the future. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll see you around.